Welcome. Glad to have you here on the first episode from The Watch Advocate. Today is going to be really fun. With this being the first episode, it's going to be exciting to jump into really just talking about watches. This is a channel that I got excited about because one, I like watches. I think it's a good time, and I love a little bit being nerdy about them, to be honest. Watching way too much YouTube and listening to podcasts on them. When you hit that spot, you realize, wow, I'm in this. You're in it for real. And what I realized was there's a lot of great content out there. Some fantastic content makers, especially in the review world, that are just really bringing professional reviews, but they're also bringing them mostly from a dealer perspective. And that dealer perspective, I totally understand. I love the business world. That's where I come from. It's my background. And I'm okay seeing all those reviews and all those things out there, but I realize that most of them are from a sales perspective. And for me, I get it. That's kind of what I'm interested in. I want to see what things are doing and why people are pushing what. But I think there's a lot of just content out there on products and not a lot of content out there on just people sitting back and having a good conversation about watches, about experiences, and what they can kind of do and bring with you. So, my goal is basically just to sit down and have a nice fireside chat. I'm from the Midwest, and that's pretty much where all the important conversations happen is around the fireplace or the fire pit. You grab your whiskey, your wine, your favorite cider, and you just sit down and chat it up. And, call that old people talk, call that just, call it what you will. I think it's a great time. And honestly, I think there needs to be a lot more of it that happens out there. And that's really why I just started the channel. I thought this would be a great place for me to kick back after a crazy day and to just talk about watches, life, and what kind of happens in my workplace. Now, granted, I am not a watch dealer. Thank goodness, I don't sell watches, and I think that's probably the most important part. Is I like to be more of a consumer advocate for people that are either getting into watches, that love it, they're really in deep like I am, they're just too far in. But I think that's kind of a perspective that may be missing is the consumer side. And a lot of that, I love the whole dealer and sales perspective. But, the reality is that that's not where everybody needs to come from. And not necessarily the best place to always get your information when there is a blatant bias. Now, granted, I'm completely biased. I have my own biases. I love certain things that people will not. There, I have very subjective taste, and we all have subjective taste. But at least if you know that I'm not trying to sell you anything, that's kind of a win. And the funniest part about this is, yes, there are affiliate links below pretty much every place you hear the show. Those are there to help out the channel. Click on them, buy something. If you do, it helps us out a little bit. That's fantastic. And like, subscribe. That helps even more. Just sharing the word about the channel if you like it. And I guess I wasn't quite sure how do you start off your first show and what sort of crazy topics are out there that you really want to make an impact. And I thought instead of just trying to make an impact, I would just talk about kind of what happened during the week as far as experiences go, things that are going down, conversations that I've had with friends, work colleagues, and other partnerships. And I think one of the most important things that happened this week, I had no intention of talking about this on the show, was just, I guess, the whole concept of try before you buy when it comes to the entire watch game. Now, I love researching watches to death. Whatever I'm going to be going after next, kind of your grail watch or just something that you're really interested in, I love seeing lots of reviews, watching tons of videos, and I can, for the most part, I would say make up my entire just view on a watch without ever getting hands on it and seeing it until I, buy it and it shows up at my doorstep or go pick it up at an AD. That is how I believe most of us buy in 2022. It is we watch tons of reviews, we read everything we can about it, we try to understand as much as we can, as long and for some of us that's an impulse buy that you just did right then and there. And for others that's a week or a month long process. And or maybe even months or years on that process. And some people still have never laid eyes on the watch that they're desiring. And I will just say that it works out most of the time. I mean, let's face it, we all bought watches online, and for the most part, it works out great. You know what? I guess I should go into a wristwatch check for today. So today I am wearing the Omega, or Omega, depending on how you want to say it, Seamaster Professional, and the white dial, the Panda look. This is by far probably my flashiest, and I just absolutely love this watch. That's it. That's my daily driver, weekend driver. It's all around. As long as it's nothing too fancy. I have it on the rubber strap, and it just suits me perfectly. My absolute probably favorite just everyday wear right now. So anyway, that's what I've got on. But what was I saying? Let's just get back to the topic here. Point at hand was try before you buy, and I'll just take my own. I didn't take my advice on one of these, and luckily it worked out for me. But let's just go into this. Was before this was when I was actually looking at the Omega Seamaster Panda, and the comparison watch to it for kind of an everyday driver that I don't feel too bad about beating up, but definitely don't want to beat up too much, was going to be the Tudor Pelagos or Pelagos. I fell in love with the Pelagos, and I'll be quite honest, I bought them both at the same time. And I thought, I really only need one of these. I found a deal for the Pelagos that was just, brand new, almost too good to be true, but it was a gray market win for a little bit under retail, and I know right now I could flip it for over retail, which would have just made seller fees, it would have evened out. So basically, if I didn't like the Pelagos, I could flip it, and the same thing with the Omega at the same time. I would have no issue flipping it and breaking even, which is wonderful. That's a great thing about those watches. But the thing that I didn't do was I had never seen the Tudor Pelagos at the time. I didn't know what it looked like. I watched every review possible. I knew this was the watch for me. It seemed to fit to a T. The titanium bracelet, the titanium all around, the size of it, that's just the chunky boy that fits perfectly as far as size wise goes. And I loved the matte. The matte look of that watch just absolutely spoke to me as far as being like, this is me. This is the non flashy. I can totally wear this at work, know it's going to be really high end, classy, but understated, and I'm not going to like freak people out by, wearing a Rolex sub. It's not that flashy like that, even though, in a lot of cases it's what I need to be. I'm just not that flashy. I usually roll around with my Mega Speedmaster, pretty chill, pretty easy going, nothing super fancy, and I'm probably the middle of the line watch guy where I work. So that's kind of that in a nutshell. But anyway, I ordered it anyway. I ordered it. I had it on ready to go, and luckily this worked out in my favor. That I just got annoyed with the company. It was supposed to ship, within 3 days. Was in stock. 3 days go by. Oh, it's not in stock. We're gonna back order it. Don't worry, it's in the factory. It's gonna be here in another 3 days. Waited like 3 or 4 or 5 days, business days, and got back with them at the end of the next week. So it's almost like a 2 week process. I was just like, guys, I am not interested in you tying up my money, which is just cancel this order. So canceled it. Felt good about it. Felt absolutely fine. And then I went into a local shop. They had a used Pelagos there that I was looking at, and I was just absolutely shocked how much I did not like that watch. It just blew my mind that in every way, shape, or form, it was exactly what I thought it would be. And then somehow you get in person, and it is just not the watch for you. To the point where I just was so happy that I had canceled that order. I walked out of that place thinking, goodness, what would I have done? I would have flipped it. I would have been literally wasted probably a month and just the cash right there that was tied up for no reason. So that is my own experience with holy cow. You really do need to, if you can at all, try and get hands on with the watch before you buy it. I mean, it really is a big difference in person, and that's why review channels will go through and say there's no way you can really review it without having it in your hands. Like there's tangible differences that from what you can be shown and what you can actually see. And the same thing goes with it's not just that. No, I love Tudors. I think Tudors are great. They are what they are. They're the little baby brand of Rolex, which is wonderful, and they do what they do. But we'll just hit Rolex. One of the biggest disappointments for me, as far as like getting hands on with a watch that's like your dream watch. I'm a Panda fiend. Like I love that white dial with a black back with a black bezel. That is just a beautiful thing, or some sort of silver highlight. Just the white dials. I'll admit, I'm just a sucker for them right now. Will that change in the future? Maybe. I'm sure I'll always love them, but right now, just absolutely diehard. And Rolex's Explorer 2 with that Panda dial was by far my most coveted watch for a very, very long time. I thought it was going to be the watch for me when I'm going to drop, probably in the prices of 2022 right now. They're running between like 10 to 14K. And if you're gonna do that, to me that's a chunk of change, and that's gonna be the one watch that you baby a bit, even though it's an Explorer too. Like it's the watch you're supposed to kind of beat up a little bit. That's sort of my thing. Like I love the more outdoorsy, sporty watches. I love being able to take the things that are really nice and use them. Like I'm not a let's just sit back and look at it sort of person. So I'm gonna take it on a trail. I'm gonna take it hiking. I'm gonna take it outside. Gonna be fishing. I mean, that's part of the watches that I enjoy. Is they need to be sort of sporty for the most part. One, because work has become a sport place. There's no need for dress in the world of 2022. Like anybody shows up with a suit and an AP or something, like I really realize that they're either completely new or they have no idea what they're doing. Like now, the world has changed. Whereas I I show up in shorts, flip flops, and a nice watch, and I'm good. And a regular T-shirt. If I put a flannel on, we're talking super high class for the day. And if I talk with any other executive or CEO that's not doing that, then something's probably wrong, unless they're literally in a full on corporate situation. It's just the world's changed. 2022 is a beautiful place. Like I expect to talk to someone who's sitting on their lazy boy, with their Rolex on. Like that's a totally different world than what it used to be, but that's what it is today. So that's just kind of like anyway. I don't know how I got off on that tangent. So we're going here. We'll keep rolling with it. But anyway, the biggest disappointment to me was the Rolex Explorer 2 when I got hands on with it, and it just changes. One, the problem was I had my Omega Seamaster Panda on, and that's kind of sad. It just absolutely was way more vivid and more special than that Rolex was ever going to be, and that's kind of unfortunate. Now, granted, if I pick one up, which I probably will in the future, it's something I still like. It's just not as striking as the Seamaster. Like the zirconium dial they used, is just so incredibly vivid in comparison to Rolex's dial on there, and. Uh, with experience, with taking that watch and doing some crazy things, maybe taking it out, to the west, out in Colorado or something like that. I can make some great memories, and really love that watch. But I just know that it right now, as far as looks goes, it will never beat the Omega Seamaster as far as just actual looks. Which totally subjective. We're talking about my absolute subjective likes and tastes here. If someone else tells me their favorite watch is the Rolex Explorer versus the Omega Seamaster Panda, absolutely, that's right for you, and I'm not going to judge you with it. You like what you like. I like what I like. But the point is maybe you didn't know that until you actually saw both of them side by side. And if you have that capability, luckily, I live in a major American city. Like I have ADs for just about I pretty everybody. Like I have no problems going around to either an AD or a boutique and finding pretty much anything I want. Why did I not go to the Tudor AD and do that beforehand? I don't know. That was just a ridiculous mistake, and I learned from it. It could have been a costly one. What if I wasn't able to flip that for a profit or break even on it and got stuck with a watch that I really hated? Well, that's happened. Welcome to the watch world. That's what I'm trying to save you from. Don't do it. Don't go there. Just try and get hands on if you can. Or if you know you can't, try to make sure you're getting yourself into a deal that you can either return it or you have the ability to flip it and not lose money, and then be wise with that. Maybe if you're gonna put something on like a credit card, make sure that you're taking an interest into account if you have it on there for a month or two before you're able to flip it. And depending on what site you're on, if you're doing on a group, great, you can actually skip the fees and taxes and madness. But if you're doing that on eBay or something, there's 13% plus shipping. So keep that in mind as you're kind of rolling through that thought process, because if you aren't really happy with your purchase and you've gone ahead and pulled that trigger, then you have to deal with the consequences of it, and sometimes that can be pretty pricey. So I really am surprised at the differences of what I like online versus what I like in person. They are very they're vastly different, and that just goes for almost every brand. And I'm just saying this because I know a lot of people, and I've talked with tons of people about this. They do not go and see stuff in person before they buy it. It just is how it is, and I understand it because I'm there half the time. But I also understand that a lot of my taste changed as soon as I actually got hands on or saw them all in person or was able to compare multiple brands at the same time. If you have a really good jewelry store, that has Omega, that has Rolex, Tudor, all kind of like right around there, or at least you have one that's close. There's usually competition really really close to each other, at least in my city. It's worth getting into and checking out if you can. It really is a cool experience too. I have not found the snobbery on any place except for Rolex as far as going into most places. Most ADs are honestly fantastic, and my test is I'll roll in looking like a hillbilly essentially, but I'll have a nice watch on. If you have doesn't even matter if you have a nice watch. That's the real test. Go in there looking like a true hillbilly, just with a good knowledge base, and see how they treat you. And I think that's very important as well. So anyway, man, massive tangent here, but that's just basically the try before you buy. That came up, and I just couldn't believe that like I am the biggest failure of that of all time, and was so close to getting stuck with a watch I absolutely would not have liked, and it still hurts me today because every time I still go and watch a review on the Tudor Pelagos or Pelagos, I love it. I really love it. It seems like it's really really good, and then all of a sudden I go right back to that memory of disappointment, disappointment in person. Just surprises me every single time. And then you think back to the Rolex 2 and just like the Explorer 2. Disappointment. Disappointment. I still love it. Now, granted, it's still a gorgeous watch. It wasn't the same disappointment of like Tudor Pelagos versus, the Rolex Explorer 2. I still thought it was really cool. It was just comparing it. I was just looking down at my wrist at my Omega, just looking at the Rolex right next to it. I'm just like, man, I'm still in love with the Panda a little bit more. And it was that's a great thing. That's a great experience to have. It's not a negative experience whatsoever. It's positive. It's letting you know that you either made the right choice, to make the right choice, or you have something to look forward to in the future. Try to find something else. It's just a really, really cool thing to do, cool thing to know, and it also is fun to get out and branch out and see other dealers and stuff that are out there, other ADs, and it's a cool time. So I know it's weird walking into a jewelry store, and don't fret, you don't have to look great. I seriously, I go in there looking like a hillbilly and see what happens, and then if you really are ever gonna buy from that place again. But at least you have a good time, and you get a water and a coke from somebody while you're in there. So anyway, that's that was the thoughts that hit me this week. I think the next podcast is going to be pretty fun. I've got I just wanted to chat about, I want to say, the mindset of people in watches, and maybe their first watch, or if they're interested in just, they're a business professional looking for something for the first time, the mindset between helping that person and hurting that person when it comes to watches is it can be pretty crazy. It can be pretty intense what you can do, and I'm gonna call it, as I've talked to tons of new business professionals. Um, it's the $100 mindset, and you know what? Maybe I'll just break into it a little bit here. We'll go a little longer today. This will be fun. So This is something that happens all the time. Is when I'm talking with a new business professional, they're coming into the office. I always like to just pull people over and play a game of pool, chat it up, see what how things are going, and inevitably I'll end up chatting about. I'll bring up watches every now and then just to see what happens. If they're wearing one, if they're not. Usually everybody in our office is going to be wearing one. But if they're not, then that's something a little more interesting to talk about. But it's just I always want to know where they started, what they were thinking, because I remember back in my first experience, everybody has their first like $5 Casio when they're 5, and most people stop wearing watches when they're like 10, which is me in a nutshell. And it always comes back to, well, what's your first watch? And in reality, it's usually around high school or college that they'll bring in a story, and for the most part, fairly recently, it's always going to be someone who picks up either an Invicta or like a Fossil watch. And it's inevitable. They've done such a good job at marketing those two brands that they pick almost everybody up, or some sort of someone's sort of a little more fancy in the dress. They might have like a Gucci watch or something like that, and they think that's the top notch and most special thing in the world, which is great. I mean, I'm never going to diss somebody on their personal selection of a watch. First thing, I mean, I'm going to congratulate you. Great, you have a watch. It most likely looks good. People don't buy stuff that looks bad. And I always go back to, my first watch that got me into it. I bought a Fossil watch because I thought it looked amazing, and I found a steal of a deal back then on eBay. I needed it for a job interview. And I was like, I haven't had a watch forever. It's welcome to undergrad. It just doesn't really matter that much. But I needed something that looked good, and I found a Fossil on eBay for like $30. And you know what? I wore that thing to death. Matter of fact, I bought another Fossil watch so I could steal the strap off of it. That's how little I do about watches, but the strap on the watch cost as much as the straps did online. I was like, why not just have another watch with a different strap? So that was that's that nutshell. And that's how I got into watches. And somebody kind of early on in the professional world, started talking about watches with me, and they're like, "Oh, you got a Fossil? Great! They actually have decent quartz movements." And I didn't know what a quartz movement was, whether versus a mechanical one at that point in time. But all I knew is I love the look of this watch. It worked for me just fine, and hey, and it got compliments to start off with. What a win! What a nice guy. And that's kind of what I always wanted to be. Is I'm not going to diss somebody on their first watch choice. So when I'm talking to somebody new, and they picked up a Fossil or an Invicta, great choice. They look amazing, and you know what? They run pretty well too. And it always kind of comes down to price at some point. And generally, if someone's not a watch person, which granted that's 99% of people, they always kind of have this max budget in mind of $100. And take it to 2022. So you're listening to this in a couple of years. I'm sure that's probably gonna be $300 in America. But $100 is basically the baseline that everybody kind of thinks of that first watch as. And anything above that, especially if you're starting off as an early professional, is really a luxury purchase. And for a lot of people, the $50 was a luxury purchase that they just needed something that for them that was luxury. That's going to be a really nice watch. And I think that's one of the most positive things about Fossil and Invicta is they have so many crazy styles that look pretty good, or they'll at least fit somebody's individual style, and they'll do the trick. They actually work. And I love that. What I want to discourage people from is seeing that for the first time and then being disappointed by it. Like saying, oh, wow, you got a Fossil? Why didn't you at least buy a Timex or a Casio or spend your $50 to $100 doing something better? And I've always wanted to stay away from that mindset. I think your watch choice is very individual. It's very personal. And money is something I never want to ever press somebody for to buy something more expensive than they're really comfortable with. Because most people are a one watch and done. They buy something that works, and then they'll just go till it dies, essentially. And if they do get into the hobby a little more, great. Or if they have a bigger budget, that's awesome. But I always think back to some people can't understand, like, $100 in the watch world is really beyond budget down there. And that's because the watch world is insane. It is absolutely insane how far you can go. But I remember myself back, and I think it was high school, and I remember working with a guy who's really excited about a G-Shock. And I knew what it was. I knew it was a tough watch back then. and like he was gonna spend $125 on it. And I remember thinking that is an insane amount of money. Granted, my what I spent my money on was basically just going and vacationing. So to me, I was like, dude, that's got me halfway to Colorado or doing some rafting, bro. And you're gonna spend that on a watch that you're just gonna like wear on your wrist. And I didn't get it. I absolutely didn't get it. This he was a biker. He loved biking. He wanted something tough that he fell off on and did all those alarms and tracking. And honestly, great on this guy. Super cool. But I still remember to this day thinking, I do not understand this purchase. What a waste of money. And I just kind of put that out of my mind for the longest time. Now I'm thinking, man, this guy was so far ahead. Right on. Getting a G Shock, God tier watch. Fantastic, bro. Um, I, Here I was just dissing him. I still almost feel bad about that. I wish I could travel back in time and be like, man, what a great purchase. Great job. Love it. You saved up. Killer. And I still take that mindset into today as a lot of people will not understand spending more money than $100 on a watch ever. So if they ask for advice and you start giving some great advice about maybe a Hamilton would be a great start, a nice Swiss watch, or a Tissot, a low end Swiss watch, you can go for like $200 or $300 and get something really cool that's Swiss, has a Swiss movement, really really nice. That may absolutely just blow somebody's mind that anybody would ever imagine spending $300 on a watch. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, and you don't want to scare people away, and have all this history and craziness that goes behind why you actually like a brand, and then they find out that was $3,000. You spent $3,000 on a watch, like those are the things you kind of want to avoid if you can, because that will completely turn somebody off to the entire hobby, and then maybe they're afraid to buy a watch or afraid to even wire one around you at that point. That's the scary part that I always just try to lead people away from, is just going maybe too deep, too into it, and scaring people away by just outpricing people. So meet people right where they are. Find out what they like and taste. If they ask for your advice, great. I think give the coolest brands you can for their price range. I mean, I still think Timex is killer. I think Seikos are awesome. Yeah, there's really amazing stuff on the lower end. Now, to me, if you're going to buy a lower end watch, in my mind, it's a G-Shock. But the G-Shocks are amazing. They're one of the coolest watches out there, and they just don't cost that much, which is so cool. But granted, someone says I have $100 to spend. In my mind, great, cool, buy a wicked looking G-Shock, and they're thinking this has to get me through all my interviews. This has to get me through all my business meetings. This has to get me through weddings. Obviously $100 on a G-Shock is probably going to be a bad choice. Granted, you'll find me wearing one in some of the biggest meetings out there, and you'll find some other executives doing the same thing too, because you can, and it doesn't really matter. And that's what I love about watches is there is a persona. They do bring such a cool thing to the table, but in some cases you can just completely blow off what people think matters. And wear a G-Shock to some of the biggest meetings out there or more. Like I absolutely love doing that. I think taking people by surprise is fun, but then again, there's a time and place for it. And if this is your first interview for a young professional, maybe that's not the time and place. So I don't know. That's just the $100 mindset. Don't be surprised when it's out there. Don't discourage people from it. Encourage people. I mean, if someone's got $50, man, they can go and buy some pretty cool stuff. Timex has some awesome watches that are down there. Casio has some awesome watches that are in that price range, and I think it's a super positive place to be. I just think if I just only imagine if that someone was talking to me and they got really afraid about their $50 watch, so if I dissed it for them, that would just be a really bad experience, and I think it would really harm people in a wrong way. So don't be too snobbery about it. Don't be too pricey about it. I am all for people buying a fashion watch if that gets them into watches because it looks good and it fits their price range. Like I'll try to lead people to a good brand instead, so they have a good movement in there, and even a good knockoff brand like Pagani or something like that. Those watches are way out of their league price wise. They you buy them for 80 to $100 on sale at Alibaba, and goodness, they're worth $300 $400 compared to like a Seiko that they're literally copying in every way, shape, and form. So oh, pardon. So there's a lot out there. There's a lot of information, and if that's the advice you want to give to somebody, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I really love this Omega Seamaster." And I'm like, "There's a Pagani that looks just like it. That's made like a Seiko, just priced for 3 times less than a Seiko." And if somebody takes that advice and goes for it, I'm gonna high five that person all day long if they love the look of it, because they got a really good bargain. They got a good deal. And it doesn't have the brand name behind it, doesn't have the build quality behind it. But I bet that watch will last 5 years, no problem. It's running on a Seiko. I mean, it's not gonna. If it goes, it dies 5 years from now. All right, go get another one. And if that's still their budget, great. That's fine. Buy another $100 watch. You don't have to move up into the world and be a big fan of it, like a huge. You don't have to make it a hobby, but you certainly can. There's just some amazing stuff out there. So, anyway, wow. What a rant. I hope I haven't been doing this for too long. I just, sitting back, talking about watches. I'm missing the whiskey. I might have to bring some of that next time. But, yeah. Anyway, if you like the show, I think, join us on the next one. Like, subscribe, leave a comment down below, and we'll talk watches next week. All right. Catch you next week.